Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with his partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
Week one, baby. We're here.
Oh, it's
The
unbelievable.
Nice thing for me is you had to sludge your way through the offseason while I took my sabbatical. I just popped back in. I popped back in a couple episodes, get my feet underneath me, and here we are back to week one. So life's good for me, man.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I know I have a lot of good friends that are, very involved in all the other things happening in our world who have been just convinced that this wasn't really going to happen. And now all of them the past week or so are like, man, there's going to be football. I can't believe it. This is real. This is great. And it's so much fun. I can't wait for it. And to get into that, we have our show tonight because of our presenting sponsor, Uncle Jumbo's. So make sure you guys are checking out UncleJumbosDistillery.com. Fantastic sponsors, local company in Clarence. Very exciting to be able to go through there. We have a couple other exciting folks we're going to tell you about tonight that are joining us for the first time. For the first half of the show, you'll hear a little bit about T-Shirt University, another local guy making it big and making his way in the world. So excited to hear about that in a little bit. But tonight we get into the New York Jets, and who better to talk about the New York Jets than our very own Bleacher Report stick to football, Connor Rogers. Connor, how we doing?
Good, guys. Good to see you. Good to talk to you guys again. I remember this time last year, we get these week one Jets-Bills matchups over and over again. So it's good to be back. How are you guys?
Not too bad. Not too bad. It is a little weird to open back to back.
Yeah, I agree. And they've done this a lot over the years, too. It wasn't like even the last 2 years. There's been a couple over the last decade that I can think of. But, it'll be a little different because I think for the Jets side of it, it's like, oh, you go up to Buffalo week one and everybody's screaming and it's mayhem. So I think for the Jets side, it's probably nice to get this one early on the schedule. And we'll see with Cuomo and everything going on in New York if they eventually do let fans into Bills games, which I don't know how you guys are feeling, but I mean, I feel like there's been some optimism there, more so recently.
More so than before, for sure.
Yes.
Definitely. And it's got to be good for the Jets, too. A quick trip up the 90 to Buffalo. First trip of the year. It's a weird year. So a good way to go on the road. If you're going to go on the road, Buffalo is probably one of the best spots to start your season in a 2020 season like we're seeing.
Yeah, I would agree. Everybody's fear, it's been so impressive what the NFL has done with the testing and to keep the COVID numbers so low that, the last fear everybody has left is the travel and the staying with travel. And I know for the Jets schedule late in the season, they have back-to-back West Coast games. And it's like, do you stay out there? You don't want these guys in hotels and external environments for very long. So like you said, it's probably nice that this is it's tri-state, but kind of an in-state game.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You say that. I remember reading, I think Sean McDermott was the only coach out of the AFC East who requested not to do the double trip. I think all three other teams are doing the back-to-back to try to go out there. And I'm assuming have, accommodations to stay for the whole stretch and not do the whole body clock thing back and forth. So it's interesting. The Bills spread theirs out. Theirs is Denver midseason and then about 3/4 of the way through San Francisco. So Denver's not quite as much. So maybe that was a factor that it wasn't like LA and San Fran or Seattle and LA. But it's interesting. I'm curious how that staggers out as the season goes.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I think when you look at it for the Jets, it's Seattle and LA, and that's man, I've done all of those trips over the last year or so, and Seattle's a very, very long one. LA, is definitely long. Denver is a little bit easier, so maybe that was some of the thinking behind it. But nonetheless, those are not easy places that I think any team looks forward to going to.
So why don't we go ahead and dive right in here, and you can open up a little bit with some broader thoughts, not just on this game, but we'll start with the Jets offense against the Bills defense and, what you're looking for in this second year, together in this, in this system. Now we're going into Darnold's third year, but with some of the new weapons that are added, they almost took a Bills approach to the offensive line, just throwing a lot of resources at it and hoping something positive shakes out of it. What are your thoughts on your ideas for the Jets offense going into the year, and then maybe specifically for the Bills game, what you see them taking advantage of?
They have a lot of holes. There's no doubt about that. Like you said, the revamped offensive line, they did kind of go that Buffalo strategy, but this was a tough year to do it. And not that a lot of people could have seen this coming, but, You didn't get those OTAs. You had a very different ramp-up period for training camp. They are starting a rookie left tackle who did not have a typical rookie process. And they have big expectations for Mekhi Becton. He's going to be on an island against good pass rushers quite often. So it's going to be a challenge for the Jets. Obviously, at wide receiver, they have question marks. The one mainstay is Jamison Crowder. Robbie Anderson out the door, really one of the only players that could ever seem to run by Trey White ever, it seemed like. And even those opportunities are very few and far between. So
yeah, luckily I think we had an incompletion on the one that he had him toasted.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, yeah. So losing Robbie is not great. It's going to be a snoozer, I think, of a day for Trey White, no matter what, this Sunday. So I think for the Jets, what's interesting, the Jets offense in general is not viewed as or expected to be by any means a powerhouse or very good this year. But even the things that they do well, the Bills match up against very well, and that's the middle of the field. Chris Herndon's back. Chris Herndon's a big piece of this offense. The Bills are athletic at linebacker. The Bills are disciplined at safety. They can take away the middle of the field. They're very, very tough against tight ends last year. So I think for the Jets, and something they just simply were not last year, they're going to have to be creative in this game. You're going to have to, are you going to get anything out of Denzel Mims, who did not have much time in training camp? Is Brashad Perriman going to look as explosive as they hoped for him to be after sitting out with a knee injury? Can Jamison Crowder find the soft spots in this, it's his own defense? Can he find those soft spots? Sure, I'm sure some opportunities will be there, but you need to turn those into points. You can't just, go from the 20 to the 50 and then punt every single drive.
What was it last year? 14 for 99 yards, but I don't know that any of them resulted in much of a game impacting play. Crowder was huge from a box score standpoint, but
annoying to watch. Yeah,
move the ball.
Absolutely. And I think for Crowder, very key on third down when Darnold had time, which was just not often. The Jets have a lot of flaws on offense, and the Bills are a very stout defensive team. So I think for the Jets, they're going to have to get Le'Veon involved in the pass game, which is, Le'Veon had a pretty strong first half from what I remember against the Bills last year. Did not have the strongest of seasons. So you need Le'Veon involved in the pass game. You need Crowder to really eat up the zone as much as you can. And then, honestly, you're going to need a surprise in the red zone. You're going to need a Denzel Mims to make a play. You're going to need a Chris Herndon to make a play against players that match up well in the middle of the defense. So it's tough for the Jets going into this one on offense. When you look at it, I think this is going to be a little bit of an ugly game, at least in the first half. So it's going to be very tough. And the Bills are they're simply not going to be an easy team to run on. The Jets can't go into this game and run first and second down and go into third and longs over and over again. That's not even an option that they can have on the table.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Aaron and I are both fans of Sam Darnold and think that he hasn't gotten a great shake.
Yeah, I would agree
in where it's been. And I can't lie. I think when I was looking at the schedule before it came out, I had a couple of teams picked out that I wanted early in the season, and they were the Jets and the Broncos. And that there was teams that I could see some of the pieces coming together as the year went, new offensive lines gelling, offensive weapons gelling, and I'd rather get those out of the way early. We got half of that. So we got the Jets game first and seventh week. We don't get the Broncos until the end of the year, and they may be able to get their stuff together. But I do think that there's a chance the second half of the season we could see a little bit more from this Jets offense kind of coming together, a lot of young pieces gelling, a lot of things going there, but I'll be surprised and honestly disappointed in that if all the talk that everybody's gone through about continuity and all those things carrying over, if all the snaps that came back and Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott and all the pieces back, if this is a bad game defensively for the Bills, there's much bigger problems than people anticipate. This is the kind of game they should be in the position to control an offense with that many new pieces.
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny you said that too, because that's how I framed it. Another Bills podcast I did. I said the expectations for the Bills is that this is a game they win. They're at home. They're expected to win the division this year, or at least give New England a very difficult time in this division. You have expectations for Josh Allen to be, make even more strides this year because Stephon Diggs is on the field. Another young running back in Zach Moss is added into the fray. Feliciano being out early in the season, that is a big hit, but this is a team that should be built to survive one injury on the offensive line or one very key injury. So I think you go into it and there should be expectations for the Bills. And on the flip side for the Jets, I was not a believer in the hire, but for those that were and those that did make the hire, this is a game that Adam Gase has hired to go win, right? We know this can be a bit of a stalemate at times against on offense for these teams, right? With Josh Allen came out, had a really slow first half against the Jets last year. Now CJ Mosley and Jamal Adams won't be on the field, but Greg Williams is going to have his guys ready to go. You can't replace those two guys. They're the two best players on this team, or were the two best players on this team, but he's going to have his team ready to go. Adam Gase was hired for this offense to go out and win you games, and we did not see that much at all last year. And for the Bills, yes, this is a good defense. It's a really well-coached group. It's a young and athletic group, but there's a reason Adam Gase was brought here, and the excuses are gone. The Jets need to come out and at least put up some kind of points to give their defense a chance.
Let's flip it over to Greg Williams. I do want to talk about that a little bit. We are going to talk about that a little bit in the Cover One matchup show that Eric's dropping here this evening. But I want to get your take on some of this because I didn't watch a ton of tape of the Jets last year. I'll be honest. It's hard with no preseason this year and all the changes that you guys made. I didn't really gather much out of it, but I saw quite a bit of having somebody real far back as a safety. And that with the Bills' threats this year with Stephon Diggs, and obviously you have John Brown taking the top off the defense. And I know Josh Allen didn't hit on that long ball, but that's still a threat. He still has the ability to get the ball downfield. How are you expecting Greg Williams to try to stop that long ball threat with Stephon Diggs? And what happens if the Bills do try to spread out and maybe force them to get maybe into some zone and stop some of the aggressive play that they do? How would you see Greg Williams defending some more spread looks from the Bills and vertical looks?
Yeah, I think number one, it's a great point to bring up that the Bills could go spread in this matchup because, listen, Greg is going to dial up the pressure. Something I was saying earlier today is the Jets do not have a lot of pass rush on the edge, right? They brought back Jordan Jenkins, who, is in ideal world a really strong run setting, and he could set the edge basically and give you 7 or 8 sacks a year. That's great. That's not your number one pass rusher. The Jets don't have that guy. So when you look at it, they're going to get creative. They're going to dial up the blitz. You're going to see slot corner blitzes with Brian Poole. You're going to see 3 safety looks where you don't know which one is coming. Marcus May is going to have a little bit more of a chance to take over that Jamal Adams role, where there's going to be times where he'll play single high. There's going to be times where he's going to come downhill and live in the box. So there's going to be a lot of varied looks. I think now when you ask how do they stop the deep play against this Bills team, I think you look at Ashton Davis, the rookie from Cal. I'm curious how they get him involved early. Obviously, it's a lot to ask of a rookie, but I think he's somebody that's going to get worked in. He's going to either handle the slot. He played a lot of single high at Cal. I know he did play in the box. He's not going to be asked to do a ton of that with the Jets because they have Bradley McDougald and Marcus May, who are so inept. They're adept at that. They're very qualified to handle those roles. So I think Ashton Davis is an interesting player that can handle a deep coverage role. I think, once again, the Jets might come out in the first half, show a ton of blitz looks. In the second half, if the Bills have to start spreading them out, get quick hitting throws, the Jets might have to sit in a cover 2 shell. That's what you need to challenge the Jets with no CJ Mosley, who's a game changer in the middle of the field, no Jamal Adams, who can wipe out a tight end or pass rush the entire game and have your quarterback running for his life. This is a little bit more of a vanilla defense on paper, barring a huge breakout from Quinn Williams as on the interior, or a really strong bounce back season from Avery Williamson after he missed last year. But outside corner is not the strongest group, right? Pierre Desir is somebody that was hurt a lot last year and did not play very well. They're expecting him to have a starter's role. So for the Jets, it's going to be a really tough assignment for Greg. But if they want to bring pressure, they're going to have to be aggressive. And if I was the Bills, in those instances, I would look to take shots down the field pretty early in this game.
And I agree, but if that's not working and the Bills try to go back to what they were good at last year, which is running the ball, they were pretty much able to run on most teams, and that was really mostly the effective offense that we had a year ago. Jets had a really stout run defense a year ago, and Quinn Williams getting into year 2, that's a guy that concerns me. I loved him in the draft, wanted him here with the Buffalo Bills. And then McClellan is another guy that scares the crap out of me. What are you seeing? I know, obviously, your access to training camp, just as ours was, very limited this year. I get it. But have you seen or heard reports of growth of Williams and what to expect from that interior line? Bills don't really have a solid right guard yet. There's some questions about the interior line. That's a matchup I'm really worried about, if you could kind of get in on that.
Yeah, the meat and potatoes of this defense is on the interior of the defensive line. There's no doubt about it. The most important thing with Quinn Williams is he's healthy this year. He suffered an ankle injury early last year. he comes out in the preseason, looks pretty explosive. He made the Falcons almost look foolish in the preseason. Hurts that ankle, and he was never right. It's as simple as that. He comes back into camp this year. He's a young player. He had some baby fat coming out of Alabama. He's in adult shape. He's a grown man now. He's in great shape, and he's healthy. So, I think we expect him to be more explosive. Now, the reason there's, a lot of confidence in this defensive line, whether you believe in the Quinn Williams breakout or not, is there's players around him that have established themselves. And that's why they were one of the best run defenses in the entire NFL last year. And it was kind of an outlier that Devin Singletary had so much success against the Jets in that game last year because, I think he had like a couple carries for 70 yards. He just broke off some huge runs. After that game, the Jets did not really get run on. So I'm curious to see if Singletary is just their kryptonite yet again. Like you said, not having Feliciano is a little bit of a, it gives the Jets, I don't want to say an edge against the Bills run game, but it helps. Now, you had some breakouts last year. Folorunso Fatukasi out of UConn, a 6th-round pick. He was a great two-gapping nose tackle last year. I mean, he was taking on double teams, beating double teams, had a really good game against the Cowboys. Nathan Shepard is somebody that was showing a lot of pass rush as a 3-tech from the interior. McClendon is old reliable. You're going to get, and they want to rotate a lot. In this weird ramp-up period, you're not going to have guys play 90% of the snaps. You're going to have a rotation. So Henry Anderson, Steve McClendon, Fatukasi, Nathan Shepard, Quinn Williams, they have quite the cast of characters on the interior of this defensive line where none of them are weak against the run. They're all very capable against the run. What you want to see is Shepard and Quinn Williams kind of take over as the pass rushers of this group. And that's a big question mark that everybody's going to be looking for week 1 from them.
Did he get his braces off?
He did.
When you talked about the baby face and everything, the interviews, the innocent responses to the questions and the braces, it was so hard to see.
It's a big baby.
He's a big baby.
Yeah.
He's a monster of a human, but,
yes.
But it was just so hard to see him as a mature adult with just the whole combination.
Absolutely. It was hilarious. And now, it was funny too when he would get a sack in college and he would smile or make a face at the quarterback. You're like, is that a child on the field that's 300 pounds? And we know how explosive he is.
On the field is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So a lot of expectations for Quinn Williams. I mean, the guy was the 3rd overall pick in the draft for a reason, right? Like, and I think, something that gets misconstrued at times is he was not lost last year. He had some really great plays against the run. But like you said, there's a reason he was compared so often to a guy like Fletcher Cox. You want to see him start disrupting the pocket from the interior of this defensive line.
Awesome. Now, we didn't have this planned, but since it's always referred to as 1/3 of the game, even though that's something that I'm trying to beat out of people this year, it's really like 15% of the game. Special teams. We know Andre Roberts was dying to have big games against the Jets the last couple of years. Didn't really happen. He's back. Usually special teams, I don't know much about the Jets special teams, but usually it's an indication of
great special teams coaching.
Yeah, they have great special teams coaching, but usually good special teams are an indication of depth on your roster. And all accounts say that the Jets don't quite have that yet. They're building it up. Is that a spot that the Bills might be able to exploit with some big plays, some field position changing plays with Andre Roberts, or are they pretty good over there on the Jets special teams? What are we looking at?
It's going to be interesting because Braden Mann is a rookie punter and a rookie punter with huge expectations. I mean, there are people around the scouting community that think this guy is the best punting prospect we've seen in quite some time. So now what happens with rookie punters is sometimes they don't realize in the NFL, you can kick very far, but if you kick very low and outkick your coverage, Andre Roberts is a really, really good returner. So that's something you got to be careful for. Now, I'm not sure if he'll be fully returning punts again for the Bills. I know he's been a great kick returner in the NFL for a very long time. The NFL has almost eliminated kickoffs if you choose to. We saw Belichick quite often try to still kick it to the team and pin them inside the 20. Classic Belichick being ahead. But I think with Brant Boyer, who's done a really good job with the Jets, he'll know on kickoffs, hey, don't give this guy a chance. We believe in our coverage units, but we don't want to give this guy a chance because he's dangerous. So I'd be surprised if there's opportunities in the kick returning game. This Jets offense, is not great. There's going to be opportunities in the punt return game against a rookie punter who can kick it very far, but that can also go against you at times. The Jets had some kicking woes last year for themselves, which will be very interesting to see how much that is cleaned up. But in terms of their coverage units, ability to block punts, things like that, this is a very well coached up unit. That's going to be captained by Matthias Farley. That was voted on and announced today. So Brant Boyer has had a really good run here. He actually survived going from the Bowles era to the Gase era. That's how much this franchise has valued him.
That's awesome.
Awesome stuff.
Before we dive into putting you on the spot and asking you for a prediction here, I want to talk about one of our new sponsors quickly. For anyone who doesn't know, the founder of T-Shirt University and tshirtuniversity.com, Dave is a born and bred Buffalo guy, a huge fan of all Buffalo sports. T-Shirt University not only has up to 80 different college T-shirts and sweatshirts, but they also carry all teams in the NFL, NBA, and NHL and MLB. When it comes to the Bills, they have you covered from Nike and Fanatic shirts, sweatshirts, jerseys, the Zubas, and Bills Mafia gear. Make sure to check them out. Really excited to have them aboard. They're going to be sponsoring an exciting segment we're going to get into in our game recaps coming up here, but really excited to have Dave and the whole team over at T-Shirt University on board with Cover One, and tonight is their inaugural show. So thanks for coming aboard with us. And now, to put you on the spot, Connor, what do you think we're going to see on Sunday?
I think we're going to see a sloppy game, and I think when you have two young quarterbacks that have, quite frankly, been very inconsistent throughout their young careers, this is, not a typical offseason, not a typical training camp. I would be surprised if either of these guys came out firing early on in the first half. We've seen Gase actually have some good scripted drives to open games later last year. I'm not sure we'll get that week one. So listen, I know the line is 6.5. I think a lot of people, anybody that's covering the NFL this year, expects the Bills to be much better than the Jets. That's no surprise. And at Buffalo, I think this is a game where the Bills win. Now, I am curious. I don't think that 6.5 line will be covered. I think this game will be ugly enough where it could be a Bills win by 5 points, could be a Bills win by 4 points, something along those lines, just because of how these teams tend to play each other. Whatever one's projected to be better, they usually play each other very close. No fans at Buffalo. It's good for the Jets. Young offensive line with a lot of new faces for the Jets. That is not good. So I think when you look at this, it is going to be probably a pretty ugly game. I do think it's one that, Buffalo is the more talented team on paper. They are the better coached team. And because of that, they'll be more prepared and ultimately control a lot of this game. I would just be a little surprised if this early in the year with these two young quarterbacks that we get a blowout.
No, I think it's really reasonable.
I think that's super fair.
I think that it's going to be interesting to see how do these teams jump out. Like I said, does the continuity matter? Is that something that everybody keeps harping on, or is that just kind of a thing to say? And does that not actually plan out that everybody's kind of sloppy and messy because nobody had OTAs and mini camps and no preseason and no live reps to be able to get into it? It's going to be weird to be able to see it. And my biggest fear is that it is a blowout and Joe Douglas realizes that he needs to fire Adam Gase immediately and that they get on to their future coach, because the longer Adam Gase holds on, the better the Bills are going to be.
It's a great point. And I think I don't think you're going to get that lucky this year. I think the Gase chopping block is coming. Maybe he survives the season. I don't think he'll survive into next year. I think for the Jets this year, a lot of hurdles on paper. And quite frankly, Adam Gase cannot coach himself out of those hurdles. He just has proven that he's just not good enough of an NFL head coach. And the offense hasn't been good enough. It's crazy how you can almost argue Greg Williams is the only reason he even survived past year one. So
that's true.
That defense was very kind of quietly good last year. I think 7th in DVOA.
They were competitive. Yeah, very competitive. And there's a big argument on Jets Twitter because I've definitely been a Gase pessimist from day one. And people are like, well, they finished 6-2 down the stretch. And I'm like, well, the Bills rested their starters the last week. And a lot of the games were ugly and the offense still stunk, even though Darnold played very well himself down the stretch. But the offense has not been great. So I think when you look at this, it's going to be interesting. It really is. Like I said, young quarterbacks, sloppy offseason could lead to a sloppy beginning of the season. The Bills have the continuity edge. I think for the Jets, it's tough if you lose this one because then you got the Niners. You start to get into quite the gauntlet of teams that are just division favorites across the board, where it'll be the Gase watch will start very early. And yay. So excited to be talking about another head coaching search again. Just love it. Now you guys know why I do the draft from a national perspective.
We've been there.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Aaron, anything else for
and...
Connor?
No, dude, I know you're a busy guy. If you can just let people know where to find you and what else you've got going on before you head out and then get back to it.
Oh, sure. At Connor J. Rogers on Twitter, Stick to Football Podcast. We do the Badlands podcast that Turn on the Jets, me and Joe Caparoso. So when I like to be miserable once a week, we'll do that one as well. But Stick to Football is where I do all my NFL, college football coverage. Bleacher Report, Gridiron, we got a ton of shows and a lot of different things planned for the season to cover the draft all year round, college football all year round. So gambling, it's the craze this year. You notice I snuck in that 6.5 spread. It's like, and I've been sweating that one. I'm like, this is one of the tougher picks of the week. Like, it's reasonable to expect the Bills to cover, but I gave my reasons. But it's always great talking to you guys.
Week one's always so weird, man.
Super stuff happens every week one, and this is the weirdest year ever. So I'm expecting some odd stuff.
Yeah, we'll have some ridiculousness. Like Ryan Fitzpatrick will hang 50 points on New England, and everybody will freak out.
Everybody will have a good time with that.
Yeah, right.
I'll celebrate Fitzmagic any day of the week.
Everybody wins. All right, guys.
Hey, man, thanks again.
Later.
All right. So Aaron, Connor's always a joy to have on. For anybody who isn't listening to Stick to Football, I think it's one of the best overall NFL podcasts that's out there. It's fantastic. It's one of my regular listens, and the team over there is, with Matt and all the guys are really good to be able to get to listen to. So we're always excited to have Connor on. What do you think about his approach there? I'll get to my, prediction here in a bit, but I do think that there's a version of this where it's ugly early and that they maybe barely cover at the end or are just pulling it out at the end because they have some sloppiness early. I think that it's not crazy that that's a possible outcome.
Yeah, dude, I hate week ones. Prepping for the show's the worst. There's just, you can watch film all day. None of it really matters. It's all new. Even if we had preseason games, none of that really matters. I know people were questioning Sean McDermott about how different is it with preseason. Guys aren't giving up a whole lot in that. I mean, you can maybe get a little bit out of it, and maybe Sean McDermott wouldn't be able to hide his offensive lines if we had some preseason games.
No,
but
Cody Ford starting both spots.
Forever. But you don't get a lot. So week one's always weird to me. I get really nervous feeling. He kind of nailed it, man. Division games, no matter how good or bad a team is in the national media and what you're being told, none of that matters when you go up in division games. He's right. Taking the fans away from Buffalo is an advantage to every road team for this first month of football. So those things do definitely concern me. I think the thing the Bills have going for them and against them a little bit is tough loss in the playoffs. Every member of this team, there's a lot of continuity. They are amped to get back in and make a run at this thing this year. That could go a little bit both ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we get into our player spotlight a little bit more. But I think he had a pretty level approach to it. I know a lot of Bills fans want to see a 50-point blowout because the Jets look bad and the media is talking about how bad they are. But I don't know that that's what we're going to see. And I'll tell you my prediction when we do those later.
So you spoke about the player spotlight, and I think that that's a good place to go next because we've actually shockingly not spent all that much time on Josh Allen, and that he's obviously going to be a critical piece of what this team does. And as we get into game predictions here in our new segment in the second half and the season predictions, it's silly to not just point out how big of a factor he's going to be in that. And I think a lot of people put out some really smart, thoughts on that, in that if he stays about the same, I think that this is a 9-7, 10-6 team that's going to be able to hang in the division because the rest of the roster is just so good. Like, there's so much talent on the rest of the roster. If he's about the same as last year, where he's pretty good, but 23rd to 24th in the NFL in passing metrics and all those different things, I think that that's the kind of season we're going to see. It's going to be on him to take a step forward. Now, we've talked about it all off season, and that Brandon Beane took away all the variables. He gave him more protection on the line. We just had a injury to one of our starting guards, and I don't know that it really matters. I don't think it's going to be a factor because they added so much depth and the ability to do that. They brought in last year, we had I touted John Brown all offseason as wide receiver one, and he ended up even exceeding my expectations. But he wasn't a wide receiver one by most NFL team standards. He was our wide receiver one, but he wouldn't have been for most teams. Now you add in Stephon Diggs with still having John Brown and Cole Beasley and the hype train known as Gabe Davis and all the different pieces that are there. That's the kind of thing that now we're going to be able to see. Can Josh Allen really take on that spotlight? And that's why we put him in the Uncle Jumbo's player spotlight tonight, that it's somebody that's going to be a big piece of this season. He's going to be a big piece of the game predictions we're about to give, and he's going to be a big piece of the season predictions we're about to give. I hope that he's ready to take that step forward, because I can't separate in my mind how much is it that I want him to do it and how much is it that I think he's going to do it.
It's hard because we didn't have the preseason and we didn't have access to camp to really look at him. We only saw the good for the most part. We heard a couple bad days or that here and there, and none of that stuff matters. The deep balls in practice are fun. They get me excited. I watch them all day. I show my wife. She doesn't care. But it doesn't matter when the Bulls start to fly for real. If he's not hitting on those, if he's not getting Stephon Diggs involved, this can go, like you said, not sideways. I think they can still be a playoff team. I say it all the time to people I'm talking to that Josh Allen's a quarterback you can win with, but this team is built where a guy like Mitch Trubisky could be the quarterback of this team and they could be a 9 to 10 win team. You know what I mean? Like, and that's where Josh Allen was in almost every statistical category the last couple of years, was bottom of the league guy. And if they stay there, fine, they can still get into the playoffs, maybe win a game. But if he does take that next step, and I think it's almost impossible with Stephon Diggs added to this unit for him not to take a step. I think even if his mechanics and his game doesn't get any better, just having Stephon Diggs on the field, a guy that can beat man coverage, a guy that can take some of the pressure off John Brown, just automatically makes him better without him increasing anything.
From my perspective, if it was the way I described it, that he stays the same, that's honestly a step back. If he stays the same and doesn't take a step forward, that's actually not maintaining, because you stayed the same with better weapons, with better continuity, with a better line. That's almost like taking a step back.
That's fair, for sure. I don't, man, it's going to be hard for him. Yeah, he would have to take a step back to maintain the same production levels. But I think almost immediately as the day Stephon Diggs showed up, the production levels in my mind had to go up, even if he as an individual doesn't get better. I think he is. I think the one thing we know about Josh Allen is he reflects internally. He talked about it on the Mark Sanchez podcast. He's talked about every opportunity he can. He's not shy about his faults. He understands. And he's the kind of, a lot of people attacked you and I when he got drafted about him being the next Jamarcus Russell. And the big thing that we talked about was the difference between him and Jamarcus Russell is he's going to work every day to improve on his faults. And we've seen it so far. He got better at things that he wasn't good at the year before. The offense should slow down for him a little bit this year. Having a guy that can get open and beat man coverage, that should do wonderful things for Josh. My concern, especially here week one with Josh Allen, is we know he talked about in that Mark Sanchez podcast, the guy gets a little too amped up. There's a lot on him right now. The season's been all about his improvement with this deep ball, all these things that he's put into his game. He needs a hit or two to get going. My worry is Josh comes into this game a little too amped up, trying to show the world that he's ready to arrive as the star quarterback of an up-and-coming team. And that kind of stuff, you get down in a game like this against a good defense because your quarterback's made a few mistakes, and that, you drop a game to the Jets that you should win. That's not a good thing, because I have this team. We'll get into the predictions. I have them winning a number of games. If you start losing the game here and there because Josh Allen gets too amped up, he is a quarterback you can win with, but he's also still, until he proves me otherwise, he's a quarterback you can lose because of. So he's got to get rid of that. He's the guy we can lose games because of, and just be the guy that you can win with him, but that he can win you games.
No, and I think that's a smart way to take a look at it, in that we need to be able to step forward into that. And I think that this is a great time to be able to bring our next sponsor on board. So we're excited that we're going to be able to introduce a new partner and sponsor all season long. They're going to be the segment sponsor for the second half of the show. It's the West-Her Automotive Group. You guys are familiar with them. We're really excited to go through there. Our segment here on each preview show is going to be Let's Get Down to Numbers with West-Her, and that, when you're ready to get down to brass tacks and figure out the number for the new car that you need, we're going to do the same thing for the predictions and the game scores that we're going to be predicting for this upcoming game. For this Jets game, I'll put you on the spot first, Aaron.
Sure, man.
What do you think we're going to see from a score standpoint with Bills-Jets this Sunday, September 13th?
So I disagree a little bit with Connor. I do think the Bills come out. I think there's a lot of amped up, not just Josh Allen, everybody's amped up in this building to get over that Texans loss. I think that stung everybody across the board. Sean McDermott, he's been putting that in people's heads all off season long. I think they come out and put up some points early. I really do. I think that they put up some points early. They get really excited. They come out and put up some points, and then things start to kind of level out. I think this Jets defense is good enough to shut down some of the things the Bills are going to want to do. And I think the Bills will try to run the ball against them. And I don't know how much success they're going to have with that. So ultimately, I have it as Bills are going to win this game. I have it 27-13. I think the Jets are maybe a little bit better than people are out there think that they are. The pulse that I get, I don't know that they're going to be much more than a 6-win team, but I think they're going to make some games difficult for teams. I think Sam Darnold's good enough to make some plays. He can get out of the pocket, do some things. I think they have enough players. You know, the wide receiver room looked really ugly 2 weeks ago, and that was a huge story. It doesn't look as ugly today going into this game. I mean, now these guys haven't put in much time together, but the talent increase over the last 2 weeks is substantial. And Sam Darnold does, you know, Bills fans seem to want Sam Darnold to fail because that somehow legitimizes Josh Allen. I don't like that kind of reasoning. I think Sam Darnold's a very good quarterback. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback in this league for a long time and cause the Bills problems in almost every matchup. We've seen it over the last couple of years. He hasn't played great, but he's made some pretty good plays. He led a game-winning drive against this defense. So he concerns me, and I do think they put up some points. But ultimately, I have the Bills winning 27-13 and getting a nice victory Monday to start the season.
I love it. And I'm going to go down right alongside our segment sponsor. Let's get down to numbers. The numbers that I look at are the Bills return the most snaps in the NFL at 88%. The Jets returned the second fewest in the NFL at 53%. The Bills have what has universally been regarded as a top 10 coach and a by far top 10 front office. The Jets have what has universally been considered a bottom 3 coach in the NFL and maybe an up-and-coming front office. Everyone has talked about all offseason how much it matters for continuity and all the other pieces that are there. And I think Joe's question is spot on, that with this identity of what's going on there, if continuity matters and the returning snaps matter and the coaching matters, it's never going to matter more than this first game. I think it's going to be ugly. I think that they're going to get out early, and then I think the Bills' monster offensive line is going to wear on that defense, and it's going to suck to tackle Zach Moss for the second half of this game. And the monsters of Cody Ford and Darrell Williams and Ty Nsekhe and Deion Dawkins and Quentin Spain wearing on you all game. I do think there's some talent, but there's not a lot of depth in that defensive line, and they're going to go no huddle, and they're going to get them on their heels. I think it's Buffalo 38, New York 10. And I think it's going to be ugly. And everything that I've heard all offseason, this is the game where it should matter the most. I'm not going to be crazy rose-colored glasses all season. I'm not going to predict the Bills to go 15-1 and something crazy like that. This is a good Bills team. They're ranked well by every outlet for a reason. This roster is outstanding. It's okay to have expectations. And in seasons like that, this is a game that you put away early and you pull away and you decisively win this game. And I think it's what we're going to see. I think that's what we're going to see because that's all anyone's talked about all offseason.
Yeah, I really wanted to have like a 15-1 record prediction this year because I do think this team, I really do. I've been saying it for the last couple episodes. I think in my adult life, I have not seen a team where I looked at the NFL and said, man, I really think that they can play with anybody. I'm not going to say that they can beat the Kansas City Chiefs or they can beat the Ravens or the Niners. I do think they can go toe-to-toe with these teams. And if you,
for sure,
the league's all about a couple bounces. You look at the success of the Patriots, they've been a great team, but really they've gotten a couple bounces in games that matter. And other teams were in those games too. So that's the way this league is, where you just have to be good enough to compete with these teams and then maybe get a run. So I do think on paper, it's a fantastic team. The depth's there. Brandon Beane's done a great job in all 3 phases putting this team together. I was just telling my old man's a Packers fan. I was telling him about Robert Foster and I said, geez, man, if Brandon Beane hadn't done such a good job putting this together, this roster together, Robert Foster makes this team throughout the span of me being a Bills fan, just by special teams ability alone. They've just brought in so many good guys to fill those depth and that special teams that there's really no reason that they can't go in and compete each and every week. But it really starts with week 1 against teams that you should be. We talked about this a lot last year. The thing that the Bills have struggled with, even in the Sean McDermott era, is coming in and establishing against teams that you should be beating, that everyone across the board thinks that your team should beat, and then doing that and beating them. So that's what I really want to see out of this Bills team this year. Is I don't mind if they drop a game to the Chiefs or even the Steelers. Steelers are going to be, I think, are going to be a pretty good team this year. If you drop some games to good teams, that's fine. But you got to come in and establish that we're going to dominate and take leads and get on the board and beat teams that we should be beating, because that's really what the top contenders do. When you see the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs, they don't lose or go down to some of these bad teams that just aren't on their level. And that's what I want to see in the growth of this team this year.
Absolutely. Wait, and shout out to Brett. Thank you for showing love to our new sponsor.
That's awesome, man. I need some news too, man.
Yeah, seriously, that's fantastic.
Mine are worn down.
And like you say, I mean, the team's talking about. You heard, like you said, you heard Josh talking about it, and that they know they need to get out fast here. They know they need to put up points fast. They know they need to be able to put their foot on teams' throats. And the only fear I've heard anyone talking about is, hey, did we really address the run defense? Did we do anything to change that? You know how you address the run defense? You get out on teams early so they can't run the ball anymore. You change the game scripts. And if we change the game scripts and then we put this 8-deep defensive line in place to be able to just rotate and take shots after shot after shot and let it go that route that strongly, that's when we start to rack up really fun stuff to be able to show what they're capable of. And I'm excited to be able to see if they can do that.
Every team, no matter how good they are, is going to have weaknesses. We talk about that all the time. Like you're never going to have a perfect roster. You're never going to have a perfect every bit of your unit. But if the defense continues to have struggles in the run game, I'm not super worried about it unless we see that 2018 stretch in November, which was pretty terrible, or no, 2017 stretch in November that was just horrible, getting gashed and getting beat. But the league's designed to be a passing game. So if your biggest weakness is your defense's run, I can live with that a little bit. I do think it's going to be better. I think the continuity in itself is going to make that better. I think Tremaine Edmonds taking a big step forward this year is going to be better. You're going to still get some frustration, though, out of Milano and Edmonds. They're going to overshoot at times. They're just
aggressive. They're
aggressive. Very fast guys. You're going to see it. Guys are going to be out of position. But a lot of those struggles in the run game, when you look at the film, was tackling. Tackling was a big issue, and I think that's something that you can fix. And I think that they have the guys that work hard enough on that defense that are going to come up and fix some of that. So I don't expect it to be the issue that it's been over the past couple of years. But if that's your biggest issue, okay, that's fine. Yeah. Sign me up. Like the deal, I'll take it.
So appreciate our man Bruce listening here. Anybody who's not checking out the Bruce exclusive, make sure you do. But replacing Jordan Phillips snaps with more Oliver will help the run defense in itself. Oh yeah, one plus every Jordan Phillips snap that we had before is now going to be Vernon Butler or Ed Oliver, and that's an upgrade in what we have. Or it's Quentin Jefferson, or it's a return of Harrison Phillips. It's just more depth in what they do, and I love the approach we had. You know, John, I think you're in the mindset of all Bills fans all the time that, hey, we're going to upset a good team or two. And I loved Ron's response in the chat. We aren't upsetting good teams because we are the good team. You embrace that. We are the good team now. The Bills are the good team. They're going to be favored more weeks than they're not this season by quite a bit. Some places already have them either a favorite or neutral in 10, 11, 12 games this year already. They're not going to be significant underdogs outside of out to San Francisco. And then fairly neutral when Kansas City comes down, but they'll still be an underdog against Kansas City. Every other game, if they're an underdog, it's like 3 points. So it's just not going to be that case any longer. And I love Ron kind of taking up for that view of it. It's going to be, it's going to be fun to be able to see where it goes. And I think that takes us into the logical next step. What do you think we see this season?
I don't love season predictions. I'm going to put that out there right now. I don't think that you can look at teams this early and tell what the teams are going to be. Sean McDermott's talked about it every year. He says, we don't know our team until November. But for the show, for the segment, for you mostly, because I really like you, I'll do it. I have the Bills as a 12-4 team. And that was a little tough for me to get there because the schedule, I think, is more difficult than it was a year ago, obviously, just on paper. But I do think this team has gotten better you brought it up, the number of snaps returning, that continuity, adding, which I was pounding the table for Stephon Diggs trade before the Bills traded for. I've wanted him for a long time. he's one of my favorite receivers in the entire league. I can't overstate his addition into the production of this offense enough. So if it is what I think it's going to be, I really think that Josh Allen can lead a 12-4 Bills team. And I still can't have them beating the Kansas City Chiefs. I just can't do it. They can outscore anyone, the best defenses in the world. That was a matchup last year, though, in the playoffs. I was dying to see a Sean McDermott defense go up against the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes offense. I want that matchup so bad, but I still have the Chiefs beating them. I do have the Bills losing to Seattle. I have them losing to the 49ers as well still, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers. I do think the Steelers are going to be one of those teams that not enough people are talking about with the return of Big Ben. I think that's going to be a tough game. That was a tough game last year with a third string quarterback, so I think that's going to be another tough matchup here this year, and they're not going to win them all. You know what I mean? Be a 12-4 team is going to be a fantastic celebration. I'm going to be down in Delaware, COVID or not, with my mask on, celebrating the stuff out of a 12-4 Buffalo Bills team.
No, I honestly, it's exactly where I am. And I think that 12-4 is the right number. I think that they're in the range of 10-6 to 13-3. I mean, 14-2 is not out of the realm of possibility. Like, I'm not going to predict that. I don't think it's likely. But when you look at this schedule, that Monday night trip out to the 49ers, that's a really, really tough game. It's really hard to predict that as a win. Almost every other game, you can tell yourself a story. When you're going to play the Chiefs, you want it to be at home on a short week where they have to come out. It is. I'm not predicting that they win that game, but if you're going to catch the Chiefs, it's on a short week at home. You're talking about the other toughest game. Seattle is at home. The Steelers is at home. The Chargers are at home. The most talented teams that we play are at home. I think that we could get tripped up in a game like the Titans. I do have that one down as a loss. I do think we're going to lose one of those home games with the Seahawks or the Steelers. I actually think the road game out to Denver late in the season is our sneaky game that could catch us in a team that I don't think they're going to have it put together early enough in the season to go on a playoff run, but I think could be like a Jets type season where they finish the year 6-2 and catch some teams off guard. I do have us as a division winner. I do have us as a 3 seed. I think that the Chiefs and the Ravens get the 1 and the 2 seed. I think the Bills get the 3 seed, and then they host a team like the Steelers, like the Browns in the opening game of the playoffs, maybe the Colts, someone like that they bring in that first week. And I think that's what we see. But I think a 12-4 season is right there. And anything short of a division championship, and I'll be disappointed. If we go 9-7, 10-6, and make the playoffs, I'm not going to be upset. But if we don't win this division, I'm going to be disappointed, because this is what this coaching staff, this front office, this roster that's been built, this trajectory, that's what they should do. We should expect them to win the division.
Win the division, and I have the expectations of a playoff win.
Yes.
You got to the playoffs last year. You were a handful of plays, 2-3 plays away from a playoff win. I have the expectations that this team is going to win a playoff game in 2020, and anything short of that for me, I know that that's pretty high standard. And to say anything short of that, I do think it's a failure. And I think Sean McDermott will agree that if they don't get to the playoffs and win a game, that's not what they set out to do this year. I know obviously everybody's going to say you set out to win the Super Bowl, but I think you take those steps in the development of a team. You see it with all these great teams. Very once in a while, somebody will come through and make a run and get to the Super Bowl. But I think it starts there. They got to win a playoff game this year. And boy, that'll be fun.
Well, and so Joe's in here, and he's in there every show listening to us. Appreciate you, Joe. And I'm not quite at that level that anything short of the AFC Championship is a disappointment, because I do think that the Chiefs and the Ravens are a slight notch above us, but we can beat both teams. And there's absolutely the possibility that the Bills can make the AFC Championship game and can beat those teams. So I love that isn't a crazy thing to say.
It's in play, and that's the beauty of the NFL is we don't have a 7-game series. We don't have any type of series. You go in, you have a game against these guys, and who knows? Look at the Titans a year ago. All it takes sometimes is to go on a run at the right time. If the Bills, they've got a good enough team, they go on a run towards the end of the year, they could plow through a couple of these teams. And it's crazy to even say it, because I consider myself a fairly pragmatic person that likes to not set my expectations too high, but to even be talking about the Bills being in the possibility of them getting to an AFC Championship is it's rare and wild for me to, been doing this show now 3 seasons, to even consider that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. Let us know, guys, if you have some questions. We'll finish out here tonight. The first one from Jeffrey Kelly. What's your prediction on the right side of the line? I believe that Sean McDermott is being completely forthright in that Cody Ford's going to start at both right guard and right tackle, and that he's the starting right side of the line by himself. I think that all the reports we've gotten so far have been pretty consistent that Ford is the right guard, Darrell Williams is the right tackle. I do think that we saw enough rotation last year with Ford and Nsekhe that I do think we see some snaps from Ty Nsekhe, and I think maybe they throw Brian Winters a bone and give him a drive. I don't think that we see a lot of rotation, and I don't think we see Cody Ford off the field very much, if at all. Maybe they rotate Ford out to tackle and give Winters a drive or two that way at right guard. He talked about it. I'm going to predict that 70% plus is Cody Ford at right guard, Darrell Williams at right tackle, and that there's a little bit of rotation in there to give some other guys a couple snaps.
Yeah, I agree. I think there will be some rotation. I don't think it'll be maybe what some people are thinking, that it'll be every other drive we'll see rotations. I think they've got their guys pretty locked in. They might want to get some looks at some other guys and get, just like you said, some fresh legs out there at times. Without the preseason, they probably want to get some looks live with these guys. And if the Bills do go up early, like I think both of us predicted, that's a great time to kind of get in some rotation without really hurting yourself too much, to get some tape on these guys, get a look at them playing against another defense. So I do think you'll see some rotation, but I don't think it'll be as big and noticeable as maybe some people are thinking based on the depth chart coming out today.
Ron asks a great question. Do you see our offense going spread or up tempo? And I'm not going to answer that, because at 10:15 tonight, you can check out the Cover One matchup show. Fantastic work by Eric Turner, Nate Geary, Russ Brown. You'll see a little bit of voiceover
they put
work from
our handsome faces on it just to sell.
They brought it in there, obviously, for the marketing of our beautiful look. But you'll see the great work tonight. They did a fantastic job really breaking that down, and that's a topic for tonight. So make sure you guys check that out. It's a great question from Ron.
I want to address the Drew talking about my facial hair real quick. I saw that question coming in. We usually don't talk about these silly things. I love Drew from Rock Power Report. He is a phenomenal person, one of the funniest guys I know. I'm sick of the facial hair comments. I have the same facial hair as Josh Allen. Okay, that's elite in Western New York, so I'm keeping it. I love it. And don't be jealous because my face is so handsome, Drew. It's okay. I still love you, man.
Taylor asking a good question. If you guys haven't seen it, I retweeted a thread from Sal Capaccio that actually he and I went back and forth on clarifying some things, because he and I are both nerds about reading the CBA, and there's been a lot of questions out there. I've talked to you guys a little bit about the change to the 53-man roster, where you can add the 54th and 55th guy, where you can now, instead of 45 game day actives or 46, you can go up to 47 and 48. Some people were tying those together as though the 54th and 55th guy off the practice squad had to be the 47th and 48th player that were active, and it's not. You don't have to do that. So being able to bring them forward, you can bring two guys active to get them game day experience. They can be that guy, and the reason they allow that is in case of injury, that you can bring a guy up that, hey, your kicker, your punter, your second string quarterback got hurt and you don't have the backup already active on the roster. You can bring that guy up and do that, but it doesn't have to be. The only rule that it has to be is that if you do a 48th guy, you have to have 8 offensive linemen total. So when Taylor asked who's going to be inactive, I had thrown out there, I think one of Ike Bottker or Brian Winters is a pretty obvious one. You have some of the younger guys. I think maybe TJ Yeldon. I think Jake Fromm is an obvious one. Some of the different pieces, but pretty much only one lineman can be, because with Feliciano down, there's only 9 on the roster. 8 of them have to be active. So it's pretty much either Bottker or Brian Winters. So I'm guessing it's Bottker that's going to be the guy.
And if it's Bottker, what happens in the event Mitch Morse goes down? Where are the Bills going to center? That's been one of my concerns. Not that I want to put that kind of evil out there in the world, but that might keep Bottker as an active, just because I don't know who else has been taking. We don't have any access, so I don't know who else has been taking snaps at center, or is that emergency center for this team? Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think I thought it was going to be Evan Boehm, and then they bumped him down. So I'm not 100% sure who it is right now, and there's a chance it's Ryan Bates is, I think, the honest answer, and I don't want to see that. And
don't get me going on Bates again, man.
I will remain open. There are people that I trust that have said he's taken a step forward. Mitch Morris specifically called him out as a guy that he saw a significant develop into year 2. So I'm going to be open to the fact that he's taken that step forward we need, and maybe that is. Carmen,
I defer, but Bobby Johnson, I just said this in the Slack channel tonight when we're talking about the rotations. I'm always going to defer to the genius of a guy like Bobby Johnson and Brian Dable. So.
Yeah, we'll see where they come from. Carmen asked a good question here. Do we think our special teams is going to be excellent this year? I think with the amount of investment they've made, and that you brought in an upgrade from Sonoris Perry to Taiwan Jones, you brought in an upgrade from Maurice Alexander to Tyler Medikevich. You already had some really nice pieces in Saran Neal. You kept Daryl Johnson. You brought in a guy like Delshon Phillips. There's a lot of really good pieces. Andre Roberts has been an All-Pro and Pro Bowler the past 2 years. They have all the ingredients. When you have the deepest roster in the NFL, you should have excellent special teams. So this is Heath Farwell's second year. He had some lessons learned last year how to approach things. I think it's fair to say that Corey Bojorquez is one of the questions, and a rookie kicker. Having those two variables could be an impact from a coverage unit standpoint and a return standpoint. I expect it to be excellent because that's what the deepest roster in the NFL should produce.
Yeah, I think I do. I agree that the coverage side, I don't have worries about it. Sarah Neal, Taiwan Jones, those are some of my favorite players on this. I stand for those guys constantly, and I love what they bring on special teams. I am very concerned that we're going to be spending some weeks on here talking about punters and kickers, and not because they're going to be bad. I think you did a great job explaining Borges wasn't bad. He just was inconsistent. And I think that's maybe the conversation that we're going to have when you have a rookie. Connor talked about it in the punting game. You have a rookie. There is some adjustment to the NFL game. Kickers have some adjustment with the different hash marks. It's a little easier, I think, from kicking scouts that I've talked to. I don't know. But I do think we're going to have a little bit of inconsistency, some growing pains with the kickers. And I think there's still going to be some frustration with Borges this year. And that's kind of what concerns me. But maybe you can make up for some of that with excellent coverage. So we'll see.
We'll do just a couple more here. Joe asking, is there any chance Gabe Davis takes snaps away from Knox and Beasley? One, I'll give another plug for the matchup show coming up here. We talk about some of that with the 10 and 20 alignments that they can do. I think there's a little too much smoke in the preseason fire for there to be nothing. That he was talked about so consistently that even McDermott talked about that he's going to be a part of the game plan. That's not something McDermott just throws out there and says. There's been a little bit too much hype there for him not to get a little more run than just a standard fourth receiver would take. It's still going to be Diggs, Brown, Beasley, Knox, 11 personnel vast majority of the time. But I will say, I think Gabe Davis gave us the incentive to run 4 wide a little bit more than they would have with how good he's looked.
Yeah, I think at this point in the offseason here, I think he'll get more than I had anticipated. I really thought that he would not be a guy that came on until maybe late in the year. Kind of like the same we talked about Dawson Knox last year, but he came on a little early. I think you see him get inserted a little bit earlier into this the way Dawson Knox was a year ago. But I'm not sure he's going to get the production that fans think he's going to get. I still think Beasley is going to be a big-time part of this offense, and especially when you have John Brown and Diggs. Beasley, they talked about, all the DBs have talked about, nobody can guard him when you have that type, when you create that type of spread and space, and he's going to find those spots. So I think Davis will get on the field. I just don't know. I don't think he's going to take away from Beasley per se, but I think maybe he takes away from Knox and some of the different types of spread looks.
Yeah. Good catch by Daniel there, saying that Bates was listed as the backup center on the official depth chart. So I think that's fairly logical. I think that's going to be reasonable of what we see. And I think I'm going to let you answer this question because I really want the answer to be what I want it to be. Chief Orley is asking, who's the sack leader week 1 with the Bills?
Well, so in the Slack channel earlier today, I'm taking it to the bank that Taron Johnson gets a sack. I think Taron Johnson comes off on a blitz, gets a sack, but I think the sack leader might be Ed Oliver. I don't think it's going to come from the edge. I think Ed Oliver, I expect a gigantic leap this year from Ed Oliver. He did so many good things at the end of the year. I'm really looking forward to his play, and I hope he just comes out this season with a bang. More Ed Oliver, the merrier for me. And I do think I could see him getting a couple sacks in any game this year.
Yeah, and I think this is the game to show it because there's been new additions to the Jets offense. I think that Connor McGovern was maybe one of the better ones that they did. It was one of the, I don't really understand why they paid George Fant what they did. I think Mekhi Becton could be good eventually. He's a monster of a human. We'll see how quickly that materializes. Ed Oliver against those guards is going to be interesting to see if they can take care of what they need to, because he is a beast. And I think he could show it as early as this week. And I'd love to see that. I can't lie. I was kind of hoping you said Trent Murphy just to trigger people.
Yeah. He is the starting in the depth chart. I just want to let everyone know he's listed as the starter.
So we appreciate you guys very much. The last one we'll go to here is who gets the touchdowns if the Bills score 38. I'm predicting 5 touchdowns on the day. I'm predicting 3 rushing touchdowns, 1 for Josh, 1 for Devin Singletary, 1 for Zach Moss. Both the Singletary and Moss are going to be in the second half when they're milking the game away, and then a touchdown to Stephon Diggs and a touchdown to John Brown. Josh Allen will have 3 total touchdowns, 2 passing and 1 rushing, and then 2 more rushing touchdowns to Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. And I think that it's going to be a game that is, they jump out a little bit early, the Jets stay in it, maybe even they bring it back 14-10, and then I think the Bills run away with it as they go, and that they're just too talented and too deep to get going there. So Aaron, any final thoughts for the people before we end on our wonderful segment of the worst thing that you missed on Twitter?
We're doing that again. Well, talking about touchdowns, I don't know who's going to score the touchdowns in this game, but I have a prediction that Zach Moss is going to lead this team in rushing touchdowns, and I'm not even sure if it's going to be close. I'm super excited about him. I love Devin Singletary. I know it was hard on him to start the year last year, but I'm really, really excited for what he's going to bring. He's going to give you exactly what Frank Gore wasn't able to give you in the red zone, and take some of that pressure off Josh Allen, and not make it so we have to run Josh Allen in those scenarios. And I think that he's going to do well and eat up some of those touchdowns. So I'm real excited for that.
Zach Moss is Devin Singletary, but a little bigger and a little faster. Like he's so similar in skill set and what he does. It's going to be fantastic. So for anyone who was out there the last couple of days, the worst thing Aaron missed on Twitter was this ridiculous beef between analytics Twitter and film Twitter in football, and people going back and forth about that, this is a bad day for analytics Twitter. They took a step back in my eyes, and people chirping back and forth about how just it frustrates me. I think one of the things I respect the most about Aaron, who grinds as much film as anyone I know, it's not even healthy. I don't think it's good for his eyes, is that he's always open to analytics, and that what stats show you, and that there are things that you can't catch with the naked eye, but what those stats do and what those analytics show you is what things to go back and watch for, what things to rewatch, what things to evaluate and figure out, hey, why is this showing that and I'm not seeing it on film, to go back and check it. And that I like to correlate it back to someone like Joe Marino. Joe is very transparent in his algorithm of how he grades people, and he talks about measurements of the combine and production and off-field concerns and all the different things athleticism wise, and all of those together equal 15%, and film equals 85%. And that's how I feel about most of these things. And that there are things like Devin Singletary, where he had one of the historically worst combines in NFL history, and is 5'7", 200 pounds, and just doesn't check an awful lot of boxes. But as soon as you watch him, you realize, oh, he's really good at football. And that it's just that simple. And that sometimes you need to be able to view that, and that leaning on analytics, I think it can open our eyes to things that you get blind to. But it was just frustrating to see that there are 2 factions on Twitter that think it's one or the other, and it's just not.
No, and it's never been. And I have definitely probably been harder on the analytics community. I think the fantasy football coming into the average fan has made people lean into analytics a little bit too heavily for the average fan. I think it's easier to consume for the average fan to look at some numbers and try to look at the game that way. Not everyone has Game Pass. Not everyone knows how to watch film. I'm still learning all the time. And I took the Scouting Academy for a semester, and I read all the books. I read, Chris Brown's book. I read Kerwin's book, and I still am learning stuff from Eric every day. So it's much harder to be an expert at watching film than it is to understand and digest analytics, right?
Yeah.
And anybody that passed math classes in college can kind of get into some of the more advanced analytic stuff. But I think they go a little bit more further than almost every reputable film guy I know does the same thing as Eric, where analytics are a tool that we use to look at, well, okay, here's the number. Why did this happen? What's the context behind this? Because the number never tells the context, and some of the numbers go too far with catchable balls and all these numbers. They really can't. It's a subjective thing when you watch the film. Was that ball a catchable? What went into the throw? What was Josh Allen doing? What were his feet? And that's where film, I think, ultimately trumps all that. And I agree with Joe's that it's usually 80% of the answer lies in the film. But if you're just doing the film and you're not looking at some of the numbers too, you really aren't getting the full picture. But the two sides got to come together at some point. I don't understand why there's these big factions of people, but the numbers guys are the worst of the bunch, because Josh Allen's a great example of it, man. They just polarize these guys because they can't put it into a box. They can't quantify it. And it works in baseball. And it works really well in basketball. The numbers in basketball, you could lay them out, and you can pretty much predict.
It's a different thing than it was 10 years ago because of that dynamic shift.
Yes, and I can always throw some variables into any set of data and say, well, what about this weather? What about this? And I can never get a solid answer from the analytics community, and that drives me nuts, because I think they need to take a little bit more time to learn film and kind of digest that side of it. But I think both sides could probably come together a little bit more and be better overall for the fans.
So as we wrap up here, one more quick shout out. Really excited for this season. You're going to see Uncle Jumbo's and West Her along with us every single game all season, both preview and post-game shows. You're going to see T-Shirt University on with us for several games. We have a couple other sponsors lined up for some other games. Really excited about the growth. And that's only because of you guys. That's because of you telling your friends, your neighbors, other people at work, random people on the bus, whoever you want to tell about the show. Tell them about what we're doing here. Share the show. Share it on whatever social media platform you're listening to. Give us a rating, give us a review. Those things really matter. We ask for that because it matters. Whether you have more ratings and more reviews is how you get higher on those lists, and where people that are new to the show or looking for something about Buffalo Bills football, it's going to pop our names up there so they can see us. So if you enjoy what we do, if you appreciate what we've been sharing, please go out and do that. It really means a lot. It would really go to show all of us have day jobs that we have to do, and we put a lot of time and energy into this, and it really means a lot to see people share those things and give us the likes and ratings and reviews to be able to do that. Make sure you're listening to the Cover One matchup show tonight. It's a really killer breakdown. It's going to be immediately after the show.
Stay here on YouTube.
Yeah, you can jump right on. It's at 10:15. If you're listening to this, go out and find it on the YouTube channel. Really awesome breakdown. Aaron, anything that you want to leave the people with here before we wrap up?
Yeah, I do. Like you said, all that stuff matters. The reviews, all of that, the engagement. Get in the YouTube comments. Tell us what you think. If you're not here live and you're watching this replay, I check them all the time. I'm not on Twitter anymore, and I still do want to engage with Bills fans, just not in the toxic. I want to stay away from Twitter as much as possible. So I'm in Slack channel. If you can get over into the Slack channel, I check on the Facebook page. I am on Facebook. If you want to come find me and talk Bills there, that's all I want to talk about on Facebook is Bills and nothing else that I see on Facebook.
None of the other things.
None of the other things. I'll block you. No. And then in the YouTube comments, let's talk about stuff in the YouTube comments. I want to engage with you guys as much as I can. So come over there and get in the comments with us.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much. The chat was awesome tonight. Had a ton of live listeners. It was really great to engage with everybody. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.